Hey everyone, I'm doing my next section on my John Maxwell. There's no such thing as business ethics. And I guess, like a lot of people in North America, I've been watching the news about these drones and kind of wondering what's going on. A lot of people are saying that it's something to do with Iran. Other people are saying it's just a military exercise. So I don't know. There's a lot of things going on in the world, and there's a lot of fake news out there. So I had a late night last night after finishing doing my cooking and then catching up on the news, and I woke up late today. I'm still continuing my job search, doing my John Maxwell speaking and my volunteering, and hoping that things are going to get better for us. I see that our minister, Chrystia Freeland, has resigned, and things are hard for us in Canada, just like in a lot of places. So to start my talks, just to let you know what I do is I read the chapter first, and I reflect on it and how it applies to my life. And then I say a prayer, and I ask for God's help to guide me in what I'm speaking, that it will be of help to the people listening to it. And I do a prayer to Our Lady of Knock. She's been my patron ever since I had to leave Europe and come to Canada. She's the one that I always ask for intercession and prayers for. And I had hoped that I would be able to go back to England, but I guess it is what it is. Sometimes life doesn't work out the way that you want it to, but you make the most of it. So for today's chapter, what I am looking at is the third principle of what can tarnish the golden rule of doing unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And John Maxwell looks at the scandals that have taken place in American business, and it's basically having to do with the abuse of power. So he talks about many people having power for them is like drinking salt water. The more you drink of it, the more your body wants it, so you have to keep drinking it. And that's how the abuse of power comes into play. Power itself is neutral. It's like money. You can have a lot of money or a little bit of money, but it's what you do with that makes the difference. And that's true of power too. If you look at great dictators that have ruled the world, like Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, and the havoc that they caused on the world, just like Russia is doing now, it was the abuse of power that led to the problems. I was quite surprised when I watch EWTN documentaries sometimes, and I watched one on Father Mitch, and he's one of the priests that does interviews on other people. He's interviewed some of the women that were in Rwanda when the massacres took place, when the different tribes started killing and murdering. And I also watched Hotel Rwanda, and it's very scary when you are involved in that kind of a situation, like we had the civil war in Rhodesia. It's very scary, and a lot of the things that are happening now remind me of that war. They remind me of how the governments would prepare. They would send out flyers telling you, keep rations at home, keep candles, keep non-perishable foods, make sure you have bottled drinking water. And we used to have a storeroom. We had like a separate room, an outhouse, and one of the rooms we had for our workers. The other one was like a storage room where we used to keep all our extra things. We had a pantry, but we also had that room. And that's why people started making things like dried meat. We call it biltong. But that's how they started making the dried meats, the salamis, because if you were not going to get meat, you needed at least to have some protein. So that's how we learned how to make the biltong and the dried meats. and the cured meats that we can buy now, our salamis and things like that. But it's basically how that power gets used that makes the difference, and how it helps or it hurts people in our communities. And you see that with Father Mitch. He talks about how he was one of the few priests that went out into the Spanish communities, and how these thugs used to basically accost them and then beat them up. And he got beaten up many times, and I was shocked that this was happening in New York, and it's scary. It's very scary when you see what happened, because those things are happening now. Even I gave the example of how I was coming home from church, and this is not that long ago, it's maybe like 2 years ago, and there was a security guard standing at the building next door. And I take pictures when I go to church. I always take pictures. Anyone that looks at my Instagram, my Facebook, will see I take pictures of the sunset, or if I see a flower that looks nice. And so I took a picture, and the security guard basically, she stopped me and she said, "Ma'am." I said, "Yes." She said, "Is that your car? Why are you taking a picture of it?" So I said, "No, it's not my car, and I'm not taking a picture of the car. I'm taking a picture of the sun." She's like, "Oh, okay." But that's what they do. And if you're a visible minority, it makes it worse. It's not something, even if I'm taking a picture, nobody should stop me and accost me and ask me, why am I taking a picture? I have people that go to my church that drive Porsches and Lamborghinis, and they drive posh cars. They don't mind me taking pictures of their cars. So why should a security guard stop me and ask me, why am I taking a picture of a car? There's rich people that go to my church. They have a lot of power in this community, and they know what I've been through. They know I'm a spiritual director. So why do the security guards and the police and everyone else have that power to just stop us just like that? It's not right. But those are some of the examples of the abuse of power. And then the loss of power. So you'll find that sometimes CEOs and leaders of organizations, they will be forced to resign because they're living on borrowed time. Unless you're living somewhere like in Zimbabwe, where we had there were systems in place that the elections were rigged and everyone knew what was happening. But it's like everybody just accepted it. Nobody went in there and said, okay, these people have to step down, until the military took control. And the military took control, and that's why now Mnangagwa is in power in Zimbabwe. So does it mean that that's not a new dictatorship? Only the people there who are living there can tell you. Because the country's gone through so much now, and the drought and things like that don't help. So reputation is like a shadow, but it's our character that matters. You'll find when you go to outplacement here, like I went to a lot of outplacement because I lost my jobs, they would tell you, hold your image. So that means hold your image of where you want to be. It doesn't mean fake it till you make it. Because when you get into that job, you still have to perform. You have to do the job. And if you've been faking it, then it's going to land up affecting whole countries. Like what's happened with EY with the cheating on the tests, or what happened with Deloitte and EY basically signing off on the Vietnam CEO banker that now they want to execute. Eventually it will come out. So it's not saying fake it like being false and telling lies, but it's saying hold your image of where you want to be and where you want to go. And then the last point is on pride. So if we if we let pride get in the way of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish, then that pride will lead to a fall. And it will only breed more quarrels and lead to our countries and our communities just becoming places that nobody even wants to live in. Nobody even wants to be there. And that's one of the things when I went back home to Zimbabwe, because I was born there. So it is, in a way, still my home. And I saw there's nice areas, very beautiful areas, but the roads have big potholes in them. There's still power cuts. Even after all these years, there's no electricity. The shops are full in the towns and in the cities. You can get everything, but it's just not a pleasant experience anymore. You can be driving in a nice neighborhood, but then there's the stench of broken, burst sewage lines. And it's not the country that we grew up in, but people are trying. People are trying to make progress. And even in Canada, we have so many 10 cities. They want to bulldoze them. And then where do the people go? If there's no accommodation, if there's nothing set up, it's easy to say, oh, it's those people. They are the problem. You are the problem because you can't get a job. But if people like me have been trying and we can't get anything, how can people keep blaming us? Because we are not the ones creating the problems in society. We're not the ones going around stealing and committing crimes and burning the churches. But people will turn around and blame us and say, you are the problem because you can't get a job. And it's really not fair. So those are some of the things that we can think about. And it's not always about winning. It's not always about beating people. It's about working with others, collaborating with others, even people who are different from us, to achieve common goals and to achieve common ends, and to look at our priorities. So I don't know how things are going to end in Canada. I don't know if things are going to get better, because this has been going on since 2007. And for me, nothing has changed. I keep investing in my skills. I keep investing in my speaking, in reaching out, in helping the community. But instead of things getting better for me financially, things just keep getting worse and worse. And if you try to hold government leaders accountable, there's a backlash. So that's why we have to do it with others. That's why I do it with the church. I do it with volunteer organizations. I do it with other Catholics. Because Catholics and Christians are the most persecuted group in the world. And you just have to turn on the news to see that people are up in arms about sex workers' rights being promoted over helping people to get good paid jobs, and over the FIFA being taken to countries that have huge human rights abuses in the name of, oh, this is an opportunity. Opportunity for what? To ruin more lives and to put more lives at risk? It's there. If you watch the We On News, if you watch some of the news channels that are not mainstream, that are not funded by the governments, it's there. And it's there about how women's rights are being taken away. They want women to stay at home instead of go work. Women also want their own money and their own careers and their own lives. We don't want to just be sitting at home doing nothing. And there are people that think, oh, well, women want to stay at home. Well, if those who want to can. But many of us are forced to stay at home because we're not getting the opportunities. And because when we use our education and we tell people what's wrong and how things could be done, they don't like it. So that's what's happening today. In the workplaces, it's happening in the banks, it's happening in corporate Canada, it's happening in the churches. And then 50 or 60 years later, then you get the news coming out that, oh, actually they infested people with AIDS. And oh yes, there was sexual abuse in the church, but they just covered it up. And even our church, there's a lot of things. I'm glad people stood up to that nativity scene where they used that keffiyeh in the nativity set. Why don't they use headdresses from Africa where Boko Haram has been causing problems for years? Or why don't they use other things? Our church is always for the Palestinians, always. Why don't they speak up about how people in Canada are not earning a living wage, that our postal workers are going on strike because people are not earning a living wage, and people are being forced into situations where we don't have any option but to work overnight, even with anxiety, even being single. There's a lot of people that would want to swap, would say, okay, you take my day shift, I'll take your night shift, but the companies won't even allow that. So why doesn't the church look at that and look at us, look at the Christians, look at what we're going through, instead of always focusing on the Muslims and the Muslim rights and working? In our tradition, actually, the Catholic tradition, the Muslims and the Christians are enemies because their religion is the complete opposite to ours. It's the complete opposite. So I really don't know where all of this is going to end, but I'm not willing to compromise on what I believe. And the young priests that are coming up in the church, yes, we'll collaborate. Yes, we will say, okay, if that's what you want to do, don't expect us to agree with you. You want to marry your cousins and you want to have intercourse with your own family members and all that. Don't expect us to say we agree with you. And don't expect us to say we agree with what FIFA is doing and all of this that's going on in the world. Because it's the reality. And unprovoked attacks on places like Ukraine. It's the reality, and that's the abuse of power that comes in. In our world of abundance, especially in North America, do you think that people should be sleeping in their cars and going to take muffins handed out by the government? Because that's what it's come down to in a lot of places, including England. And then they want you to be so grateful that you even got that little bit. Because there's no jobs. In some places, they've brought in a basic income because there's no jobs. So they're letting people sit at home and they're covering their rent, their food, their transportation. And entrepreneurs like me that are going out and trying to get work and speaking engagements, we're not getting the support. We're not getting the support to play our music in churches or in respectable places. I don't want to go and sit and play in a bar. It's a different culture here. It's not like the pub culture in England. The pub culture in England is a family-oriented culture. We don't get the support. So that's what I find. That's my experience. But the use of power and the abuse of power comes into play in everything. And we also have to see how we can help ourselves and help others. And with corporate America, even now, that young man that they're saying killed that CEO, it's a crime and it's an awful crime. But there are people that have set a GoFundMe up for him and they're raising money to stop him from being prosecuted. Because they're saying there's so many people without medical coverage and people that are in desperate need of getting their health concerns addressed and they can't get it. If you're going to say, oh, well, yeah, it's a murder. What about how many people got murdered in Rhodesia? What about all the racist laws that they had in place here in Canada and in Rhodesia and South Africa? Everyone thought that was fine too. Everyone was happy with it. That's why priests like Father Mitch got beaten up, because they took a stand against it. I would probably not have gone to university if the South Africans, if Wits hadn't stood up to say every race should have the opportunity to study. So there has to be that balance. It's an abuse of power, what's happening in Canada, because the ministers are enjoying their lives with their big cars and their big houses, and their children are going to the best schools like Branksome Hall, and the rest of us can't even put food on the table. And we can't even get jobs in our fields as executive assistants, using our project administration skills, using our education. There's no paid jobs in the church, and when you do apply for them, they tell you, oh, you haven't worked in the church. So how can you work in the church if your parish priest is giving you a recommendation and you've been volunteering in the church from the time you were a child? What more do they want to get a job in Canada? But if a Muslim comes in, or a Hindu or somebody else, they'll give them the jobs in the Catholic charities, in the Christian organizations, and they'll keep telling me, even though I'm a spiritual director and I've got the support and I've got the support of my parish, that, oh, you don't have the experience. So the Muslim person and the Hindu person and the atheist, they have more experience. That's basically what the church in Canada is telling me. It's an abuse of power. And I'm glad people stood up to Pope Francis, because some of us are tired of it, including the young priests that are coming up. We're tired of it. We're tired of always being broke, of never having jobs, of never having work, of not having religious accommodations, not having health accommodations. I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of the banks getting away with this. This is not new, what TD's done. It's not new. It happened with Lehman Brothers. It happened before that. Now they're going to, the auditors are going to start going into all the other banks, because they're saying it wasn't only TD. There were other banks involved. It never stops. It never stops. And when you get good people like me working in the bank, they don't want us there. They're like, oh, there's no job for you, you should move on, and then maybe after 10 years you can come back. They don't open the door for you to ever come back. They'll hire you on a 3 to 6 month contract, and then they'll let you go. And it's not fair. It's not fair to people like me who have done the work, who are hardworking, and who know how to get things done. It's not fair, and it's also not fair for the Global Fund to promote prostitution and to promote human rights in prostitution, because that's basically what they're doing. They're promoting prostitution when they're saying sex work. It's not work, it's prostitution. And it's basically opening up the door to say, yes, anyone can approach anyone and say, oh, they wanted to be your friend, when there's a power differentiation and there's a gap in the wages and people are not equally yoked. And it can go on. They can spoil your whole life like they did with me. And everyone will say, oh, try to show some understanding. Why? Because you had a government job and you have a government income and you have a government pension. And the rest of us must show understanding. Show understanding for what? Give me a break. It's an abuse of power.